Apparently first it was Menace. Nah, it was Mr. Heli. Yes, it's hard to believe that the guys at DMA and Psygnosis hadn't seen the arcade game Mr. Heli by Irem, released in 1987, a helicopter-based shoot-'em-up where you collected crystals and powered up your helicopter in order to defeat the baddies, and it scrolls from right to left, left to right, and up and down. All those things that Blood Money later did. Brought to the home systems by Probe via Firebird. We're going to start off on the Atari ST. The slightly garish loading screen. Incidentally, the game's called Battle Copter in the USA. Quite an interesting arcade game, and people sometimes think it's two-player when it is, but it's not co-op gameplay, it's turn-based. So replicating the opening animation from the arcade here on the ST. And the game just starts, which is a bit of a surprise, because your helicopter slowly sinks. And it looks similar to the arcade, but, well, the animation is nowhere near close, as you'd expect. And the multi-fire button option from the arcade has been converted down to a single fire button, so when you press fire, all your weapons release at once. Actually, you know what? That's far better than mashing two fire buttons at once. So we've got some crystals, and I bought some power-ups there, which I think is a bomb, which enables me to drop things down. There's a decision to be made between defeating the baddies and trying to pick up as many crystals as possible. So over to the Amiga. Now in the CMVG review of this, in the future releases section, they mentioned the Firebird are bringing out a version for the Amiga, and it's going to have better graphics than the ST. Improved graphics, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing, in fact, Zap64, the time when they were still reviewing Amiga games, called this a poor ST game and gave it 60%. Strongly criticised the ST graphics. And here's the game running on an Acorn. Well, really, it's a Philips monitor on the Amiga. And obviously the graphics are exactly as they were designed to be seen, although still very jerky and not as good as you'd expect from the Amiga. And it comes into contrast as well when you play the PC Engine version, which, I don't own a PC Engine, so I'm not going to be showing that, but it's things like the power-ups missing and the smoothness of the graphics, and the fact this is just a cut-down version of Mr. Heli on all 5 of these versions we're going to see today. Over to the Amstrad CPC. Now, that loading screen you've probably got on your version, like I've got there, is a fan creation. It is not an original loading screen. Not the best fan creation in the world, is it? Rather ugly. So the Amstrad version is everything smaller, but it's scroll. Look at that vertical scrolling there. Very smooth. And the movement's hardly any worse than the ST. All the Amiga come to that, given the limitations. So we're down here, and you walk along, you don't get a walking animation on the Amstrad. And the Probe telltale sign of black lines around the graphics when they're kind of something when they're against something else. Incidentally, on the Amstrad version, if you shoot the rocks there, shoot them enough, you get some more crystals, just like the arcade. But I don't think any of the other versions do this on the home port. Possibly the Spectrum. But what's it like for Amstrad green screen owners? Well, not terribly good running on my GT65 here. Yes, I've had to compensate the camera for the rather bad geometry on the screen. It's a bit worn out, but you can see the crystals aren't very clear to see. The enemies do merge slightly into the background, but as a green screen owner, you'll be, well, used to this, really. It happens fairly often on some games. And I'm not starting all these versions from the beginning because I want to get through the entire game without trying to show you too much of the same thing over again, which is a fault of ChinnyVision sometimes. So, yeah. If I continue shooting that, I get a crystal. Only the Z80 versions appear to do this, and it is something authentic from the arcade. Spectrum graphics here do have the feel of converted sprites. There's something about them. I can't quite place my finger on it. There's just something about it that says, look, this has come from another system. It's been ported over. And unusually for a probe game, the main play area is just 2 colours. Usually probe are like, let's have all the colours at once. We don't care about colour clash, let's have all of them. I showed this footage to some people on Twitter and they said, you should have music on the 128K version there. And indeed, I probably should. But I don't have it on these versions. I tried a +3 image on the emulator. That did have music. It seemed to be possibly a modded version. I wasn't sure. Something about it didn't strike me right. So I would expect the Spectrum 128K version to have music, but I don't have it. Over to the C64, and look at this. Look at the little helicopters going round and round and round and round. Soundtrack by the Maniacs of Noise on the C64, which is always a good sign. Zap64 gave the game 84% and really rather liked it. And I have high expectations of the 64 version because it has all the hardware to do this kind of game. You can select which level to start on, but be warned, if you select level 2 or 3, you will need the code to start those levels. So yeah, everything's smoothly scrolling as you'd expect. You've got the option of sound effects or music. I'm opting for sound effects now. We will have the music in a little bit. So same size sprites as the Amstrad version. ChinnyVision gave both the Amstrad and the C64 versions 86%. ST and Spectrum got 84%. And the Amiga version wasn't out at that time. Again, indicating that the Amiga version is an ST port. Forwarded it on. So we should be coming towards the end of the first section of level 1. Each of the 3 levels is broken down into 3 sections. The first time this game came to my attention was in the review in CMVG in the towards the end of 1989, where it had this review of the game, all these screenshots, and the Amstrad version looked really good, and I went, cool, fancy having that game. Never got hold of it, never got hold of it. Not sure it got a budget re-release either. So here we are on the ST. We've defeated the section 1 baddie of level 1. And we now arrive in this underground dark section. And then when you escape from it, it all lightens up. So it doesn't have the polish of, well, on these versions, really doesn't have the polish of the Blood Money on by Psygnosis. And this is the Amiga version. But it does have playability. It is hard though. When you die, you get pushed back to a certain restart point in each level. So there's 3 different points on each level. The beginning, usually when the screen changes direction, is where the restart points are. So we're going up now, and at the point we start to go right, we'll hit a restart point. Here on the Amstrad. I really like the Amstrad version. I've highlighted it on ChinnyVision before, and here's the Spectrum, which I don't like as much. There's something about this. It's that probe thing where they've got all these tools to easily port games between systems, and sometimes they just go, yeah, we'll just run it through that and not refine it. And what you end up with is something like this. Back to the 64. Collect all the coins we can. And then here's the big end of level 1 baddie. It's taken about 8 minutes to get this far, approximately. Trick here is to knock out the machine gun things, or whatever they are. Here you go. Here you are on the ST. If you knock out that one above you, you're now in a spot where the other guns can't hit you, I think. Or perhaps they can. But they don't hit you enough to deplete enough energy to kill you. Right, and you've got to be really quick to pick those up because there you go. That's the amount of time you get. Amstrad CPC, nice big baddie. It's so probe on the Amstrad, isn't it? It's so probe. it hurts. But I'm not complaining. They've done a good job here. 64. Looking superb. And there's your massive password. That's what you need to load up level 2. And when you load it up, that's what you have to type in. It's quite long. Here we go. Upward scrolling on level 2 here. Be warned with these upwards and downwards scrolling sections. Oh, now I've got infinite lives there, so it doesn't matter. But that would have been a lost life there. If you get trapped between the objects and the bottom of the screen or top of the screen, you just die. But I have infinite energy on the 64 because I'm a cheat. And frankly, I want to get through all the way through this game because there's one thing about Mr. Heli, it's not particularly easy. I know some of these reviews, like Amstrad Action said it was a tad too easy. But it's not easy in terms of the restart points in places. Amiga version just ending level 1 there. Very scratchy soundtrack on those samples on the Amiga. No. So here we go on level 2. And you notice this kind of zoomed in view. Oh, see, that's what happens. Your greed for getting the crystals versus the amount of time you've got to get them. And when you lose your lives, you lose all your power-ups. So you're back to really rubbish, just the kind of default one horizontal weapon and one vertical weapon. Which makes getting more crystals hard, because you've got to be able to clear the blocks away. See? If I'd had dual weapon on the front of the helicopter there, I would have cleared that much quicker. Right, so I've hit a restart point on the Spectrum, so we're at the top of level 2. The other thing about the Spectrum, it doesn't have chug. It really does chug, and because these are volcanoes, if you hadn't guessed, from these Spectrum graphics here. Specky can do better than this. Oh. At least I've got dual weapons at the moment, but you've got to get your timing right here. Hardly any energy left. Oh. And the thing is, you don't get any rewards for killing the baddies. Everything is about the money and picking up crystals and then getting the right power-ups. And there's no shop either. That was more energy there on the Amstrad. So it's not like you collect the money like blood money and then go to a shop. You're just picking up the power-ups. And if you've got enough money, you can have the power-up. Which takes away any kind of decision, really, because you don't have time to decide. What's that icon there? And yeah. So the Amstrad version certainly doesn't chug like the Spectrum version. The horizontal scrolling is not as smooth as the vertical scrolling, but it's all right. I think C64 owners might argue that the C64 version is worth a couple more percentage points than the Amstrad version because, as I say, CMVG gave them an identical score of 86%. Oh, there we go. And when you die, you lose all your cash as well, which is a little irritating thing. But one nice touch is some of the enemy bullets, you can shoot them. Not the small ones, but some of the bigger ones, you can actually shoot them. C64 version is getting really frantic now. All these home versions are very cut down from the arcade. On the arcade, on some of these downward sections, whole platforms come away and start floating at you. But you don't get any of that even on the 16-bit versions. It's a very workmanlike conversion, trying to be faithful without anything too ambitious. But I really do like the 64 version. It's of all of them, it's grabbing me. No, I don't think it sets the world alight. I mean, you know, it's not into the kind of awards scores, is it, with 84% from Zap? But it's all very nicely done. It's a very competently done, enjoyable shooter with a few faults, i.e. the respawn points and just the gameplay mechanics from the arcade. I think, you know, some of these problems here aren't the fault of Probe converting it. some of these problems are because of the arcade version and just the way, like how you lose all your money. So getting power-ups back, back to the Spectrum version, chug, 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 chug. That if you've got a load of power-ups, you lose your life, it's a struggle to get them back again. You don't keep them, you don't keep your money, you can't go to a shop and just power up again. You just have to go back to the lamest setup possible and have to try and battle back to where you were. And I think that's... this is the end of level 2 baddie. It's a big bouncing thing. ST version, some kind of crab, I don't know. And again, no time to pick up all those bonus points. You don't get a lot for defeating an end of level baddie. So off to level 3. I just wish it had, when it loads up each section, press fire to start. It just kind of drops you straight in. You start looking at your phone or something, and then it's like, oh, hang on, we're playing again. The crystals will disappear if left for too long, and if the big crystals hit the ground, they split into smaller crystals that are worth less, even if you collect all the ones that broke out of it. This is a very hard game now on the Amstrad. Only 3 levels, and this is level 3. But there's a lot going on. It doesn't have the length of games like X Out, for example. Although I think there's more to do in that you get to shoot these things and shoot the rocks and get the crystals. Further into level 3 on the 64. And on level 3, it's quite hard to find power-ups. There's not an awful lot. There's a lot of crystals around, but there's not an awful lot of power-ups. So if you die again, it's hard to get back to where you are. The trick is to try and get through the level without losing a life. Luckily, I'm on infinite energy, so it doesn't matter for me. I'm nicely tooled up. And I don't agree with, as I said before, the comments that it's a bit too easy, this game. It really isn't. It's quite hard, I think. But then again, I'm notoriously bad at shoot-em-ups. So here's the mid-level baddie for level 3. While we're shooting this giant wasp thing, I just want to thank the Patreon supporters of ChinnyVision who keep this channel ad-free for as long as YouTube allows us to be. And if you want to join up, it just runs from just $1 a month, £1 a month, and you get access to previews of upcoming videos, the occasional exclusive and occasional competition as well over on Patreon. And also there's the ChinnyVision podcast, which is free to everyone. Look in the description below. Half hour of just chatting to people like you about their home computer experiences, what arcades they were going to, and so on. Just half hour, no adverts for craft beer or, and let's be polite about this, garden shears for your bushes. None of that stuff. Basically, we just get on with it with no faff. So here we are on the ST, and another dark section. Mr. Heli likes doing this. You just have to keep on firing your weapons off until you find your way out. Well, where's this exit? Where's the exit? This is quite tedious. No, right, is it over the other side? Oh, no, not there. Right, okay, so... right, here we are. I mean, why this helicopter doesn't have some kind of lights on it to begin with? It's got all this advanced weaponry and yet no lights. Seems remiss of the designers. Again, we're just going through this section, and out we go. And this is the end of game baddie on the C64. A big... I don't know what it is. What is it? and they fudge its dying by having it scroll off the screen and change colour. And on the ST, is it a face? What is it? But I've defeated it, I think. It was a great job, Mr. Heli. The muddy and the black copters were destroyed, and this star was saved from the crisis, yada yada yada. You'll be remembered forever. And if you do this in the arcade, you'll get to play the entire game again in order to complete the game. But you don't do that on these systems. Mr. Heli, a slice of Japanese shoot-'em-up action on your home micros, and very well ported by Probe. It's not a game that sets the world alight. I think those ChinnyVision ratings are pretty much spot on. Scores in the 80s, not the 90s. And that's not down to Probe, that's down to just faults with the original arcade game. Difficult respawn points, the way you collect the money and then just pick up the weapons as they're lying around rather than going to a shop. But hey, this is all part of the development of computer games, right? The ST is the lead 16-bit version. It's slightly lackluster, to be honest. It tries to accurately replicate the arcade, but never really gets there. It's rather jerky and choppy at times, with a soundtrack that's no better than the Amstrad, and it's not that, wow, this is a 16-bit game experience. The Amiga, and I think Zach was slightly harsh saying this is just an ST game and giving it 60%, but then again, yes, it is just an ST game, but not a bad one. On the 8-bits, the Amstrad version and the C64 versions are really rather nice. They scroll nicely as well as you can expect on either of the systems. C64 version has the advantage of a Maniacs of Noise soundtrack and that extra hardware, and yes, it's zoomed out, everything's smaller, but it plays better on that system than the two 16-bit versions. The Amstrad version is better than it has any right to be, given the state of the Spectrum version. Probe had done a proper job here. Vertical scrolling is actually really good, really smooth. Just the horizontal, little bit jerky, but it plays well, and actually, as I pointed out, has some of the features of the arcade game that are actually lacking from the 64 and 16-bit versions. Spectrum version is poor. What went on here? What has gone on? Ignoring the is there music, isn't there music issue, because frankly, there's so many modded versions around, I just don't know. It should have the Amstrad music though, but it's so jerky and the graphics have something about them that look automatically converted. Probe have a history of these wonderful, colourful Spectrum games with great looking graphics. Is this a case perhaps like Outrun Europa, where they had colour and took it out? Because Outrun Europa also has this weird look to it, and part of that is because they had colour in the game and then they took it out. There's a question. Does this game have the sexiness and appeal of Blood Money? No. Does it even live up to games like X-Out that come out a couple of years later? No. But actually, for the time period, this is a really solid arcade conversion, certainly on the Amstrad and C64, and they still stand up to this day. The other versions, no. Not really.